Hello, friends. Today I'm just going to film a really short video just going over the hem stitch. So the hem stitch can be done on any weaving project. You can even do the hem stitch on one of the mini looms. And all it does is locks in your stitches so you can have some fringe that is protected and that won't come undone. So if you've taken one of my classes, this is generally where we start our hem stitch. So what we do is add a little spacer on the bottom of our loom. So we have some fringe, we weave as much as we want to weave, and then we can start the hem stitch. So what I like to do is I like to turn my loom so that the end, the part that I'm going to be performing the hem stitch on, is on the top. I find that it's easier to work with this orientation. You can take your little spacer out, and then the tail that you left at the beginning, you can put on your metal weaving needle. So when you do the hem stitch, what you're doing is you are surrounding whatever warp threads are going to create your fringe. You're surrounding it completely with your yarn, and then you are securing it by stitching into your fabric, and then you're moving on to your next couple warp threads, surrounding them, securing it by stitching into the fabric, and so on until you have all of your warp threads surrounded and locked in, and your fringe is created. So depending on whether you have gone over or under your first stitch, you might have to do kind of twice around or 1.5 times around on your very first movement. I like to do with this little loom, I like to do 2-strand fringe, and you always want to come up between the fringe that you're creating and your next group from the back to the front. And so what I mean by that is I'm going to go around my first 2 stitches. So I'm coming up between my second and my third warp thread from the back to the front. And if you look closely, you see that I have only surrounded one of my warp threads. I haven't surrounded warp thread number 1 over here on the left. I've only surrounded number 2. So I'm going to go around that one more time, just like this. And now you see that both of these warp strands are surrounded by my thread. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pierce my fabric from the front to the back about 3 rows down between my second warp thread and my third warp thread. So I'm going to just send my needle right through the fabric I've created, and I'm going to snug everything down. And so you see that you have this little loop right here over your warp threads. You've got your vertical stitch going from between your second and your third warp thread down into your fabric. And then I'm going to cross over in the back between my 4th and 5th warp threads. I'm going to come up just like that. And then I'm going to surround those 2 warp threads, my 3rd and my 4th, come up again between my 4th and my 5th. So those 2 strands are completely surrounded. And then I'm going to go down in the same place I went down the first time, just like that. And in the back, you can see that the strand coming from where I pierce the fabric to my next movement, to my next 2 warp threads, is more at an angle, whereas on the front, it looks more vertical. So then I'm going to come up again. Now this time I'm going to come up between my 6th and my 7th. So I've got 1, 2 surrounded, 3, 4 surrounded, 5, 6 are the ones I'm working on right now. And then I'm going to go around those completely surrounding those. I like to snug it up before I pierce the fabric or as I'm piercing the fabric, so I have them nice and snug. And then I'm going to keep doing that all the way across. This is a technique that can be used on all kinds of looms, all kinds of weaving. If you want fringe, this is the way to lock everything in. As I get to my last two, you'll see that I don't have a space to pierce the fabric after I have come up and surrounded those last two warp threads, right? So right now, I've got everything done. My last ones are surrounded, but I don't have that fabric between my last warp thread and my next one to pierce. So what I generally do, sometimes I'll switch to a thinner tapestry needle, but at this point, I just send my needle. This is a pretty fat needle to do this, but it does have a nice little point. So I send my needle down through some of my warp threads. I'm going parallel to my last warp, and I'm tugging it so it's nice and snug. And that is going to secure that yarn and lock everything in. So that is how I do a hem stitch. And then when you're finished with the other side, wherever you finish, do your hem stitch there. And then you can take everything off of your loom, and then you can kind of measure to make sure you have the same fringe on the top and the bottom, and trim and all that jazz. And then you're done. Thanks so much.